Hey guys, wanted to record the little video about the credit scores because it's typically a topic in class that people find quite interesting. Um, some specific things I want to say about credit scores, and then there's some general things I want to say. So I think this is a fine introduction. This is the beginning of section 10. Credit scores determine to a large extent if you can A, get a loan, and B, the kind of terms you're going to get for that loan. And the terms, by terms I mean what kind of an interest rate are you going to get. Remember that one of the big concepts out of this section is that financial things that you buy are different than TVs and computers and phones and cases of Coca-Cola, because you can't see the price tag. What you get typically is you get an interest rate, and then how long it takes you to pay that back determines to some extent how much the thing costs in the end. But it should seem quite logical that you get a 3% interest rate, you compare it to a 5% interest rate, you're probably going to pay more for the loan with the 5% interest rate. The only reason I say probably instead of definitely is because it's possible I could pay it off faster with the 5%, and the guy with the 3% pays it slower, and whatever. But all other things being equal, higher interest rate means you're paying more for the loan. So a good credit score can get you access to credit, and it can get you access to better interest rates. We'll come back around to the fairness question at the end of this. Okay, so what I did is I went to Credit Karma and I looked at my own thing, and just sharing the website was just too much personal information. But this is kind of the dashboard for the credit score. And most things on here are good. There's a couple things that are yellow. Yellow means it's kind of, they have three color codes. Red is bad, yellow is okay, but could be better, and green is good. So I wanted to just kind of go into what they show me when I click on payment history, credit card use, derogatory marks, credit age, total accounts, because maybe that'll give you some insight into, how things actually work. Because there's a lot of misinformation about credit scores. For instance, you got to keep a balance on your credit card or else you can't build your credit. That's not true. Okay, payment history. So one of the things I think is pretty interesting is you actually need, and I wasn't able to get the little scale over, but the percentage that's required to get like positive marks and not be dinged for this is you almost need to be perfect. I mean, 97.5%, that's 3 late payments out of 120. So the window kind of cycles through fairly quickly. So they say it's easy to recover from, but can hurt your score significantly. 90-day missed payment, I guess there's different kinds of reporting. Like if you haven't made a payment for 3 months on something and you didn't have permission to not make payments, then that's a big red flag that could really damage your credit score. I mean, the thing about this from my perspective is, in sort of thinking about my friend who bought the motorcycle and regularly made payments, but never paid attention to whether he was making his payments on time or not. He just kind of made them once a month, and whether it was before or after the due date didn't really matter. They charged him a $10 fee, which added up to probably hundreds of dollars over the course of the loan that he paid off. But moreover, it was probably hurting his credit score. Now, I mean, if you're not going to get, looks like from the little graph that I was looking at, if you're not going to get up to 97%, then it's not even worth worrying about it for some time. But, making sure you're paying your minimums is a big feature of making sure you are getting credit for this component. Okay, so this part pertains to how much of your credit card line you're using. So this is a percentage calculation. You've got a $500 line and you want to stay under 30%, then you got to do the math to figure out how much that is. Of course, they'll calculate it for you, and it's best if you can pay off your credit card every month. But if you're just getting started, you want to try to make sure you're keeping your debt low compared to your credit line. When you get up into the 80s and 90s, then credit cards get real nervous about that because they feel like you're maxing out your lines of credit, which could be a sign of financial distress. Okay, derogatory marks are when things go to collection or public records, bankruptcies, tax liens. These sorts of things are repairable. For instance, I had a colleague who had to declare bankruptcy at one point and start over. It took him 5 or 6 years to rebuild it, but he got there eventually. Collection is, what there's some links here talking about what to do if you're having people who are trying to collect debts. And I think there's a 7-year limit on how long debts can stick around on your credit report. All of that has to do with distress. I mean, you're not going to be going into collection and going into bankruptcy if you're just kind of motoring along the road of life. You probably are already in pretty deep trouble there. Credit age is pretty interesting mathematically because they basically take the average of all of the cards measured in years and months. And so that would be a good math problem for us to do sometime. But it also gives you some perspective about if you have a bunch of credit lines, which ones to shut down first. And actually, your oldest cards are worth keeping around because they extend your credit age, and that makes you look like a more mature borrower. And then 2 more, total accounts. So there's some pretty high number of total accounts. I have 22 accounts, which is kind of insane. I was trying to get miles and things for a while. But anyways, having a lot of accounts is not a bad thing, especially if you have credit cards and you're not using them. There's nothing wrong with that. Of course, if you're paying fees for those credit cards, then you're paying something to the bank for the service of giving you this credit card that you're not using. So you have to think about whether that's worth it or not. But this third point is interesting. Like when you finally pay off that mortgage or your student loan or your auto loan, your score could actually drop. And if that score has been around a long time, it's giving you a lot of credit history, then it's gone and it's not useful to you anymore. In the hard inquiries, there's a difference between soft inquiries and hard inquiries. Hard inquiries are where an institution goes in and they actually do a thorough credit check of your background. And that shows up on credit reports as actually a negative thing if you have too many of them. It's okay to have 1 or 2 in a couple of year time frame, but if you have, I think I have 4 in the last 3 years, and that's not in the red, but it's in the yellow. It's not what they would like, so that's already too many. When applying for mortgages, applying for a car loan, those are hard inquiries. Applying for a credit card, so that means that you shouldn't just go out and get like 16 credit cards all at once, or you're probably not going to be able to do that anyways, because those hard inquiries, reflect on your credit score and then drive the score down. Okay, so that's kind of the nuts and bolts, at least from Credit Karma's perspective. There may be other people who have other information about what's good or bad, but I feel like this is a pretty thorough kind of walkthrough of credit scores, which way more detailed than I knew when I started. So the last thing I want to talk about was a little bit about fairness, because talk about credit scores, and there's real life implications for, you know, whether you get a loan, what kind of rate you're going to get, that impacts how much it's going to cost. And I just did a quick Google search here, credit score racism. There's plenty of results there that you could go look at. I think that the headline on the first one is probably more than enough as an intro. I mean, the problem is that you're kind of rewarding people. The idea is that you're rewarding people for good spending habits and good behavior. But the reality is that you're actually punishing people who are at the lower end of the scale because they're riskier, right? But then it costs more money for them to borrow things, and then they have to pay more to financial institutions to get the exact same service as other people. And, you know, I think that's a little problematic in terms of fairness and what we want. You know, I mean, I feel like people who are struggling should have more opportunities to some extent to get access to reasonable lines of credit and loans to do things, because those kinds of things can make a difference in people's lives. I mean, the worst example of that is the payday loans, who don't even publish their APRs because they tend to be things like 200 and 300% APRs, which sound horrible, and they are. You know, they come out as fairly low fees, maybe $20 for 2 weeks or something like that. But you know, they're in many ways very predatory on people who are really scraping by and trying to, you know, cover this expense and that expense. And, you know, what kind of a difference would it make if a person who was scraping to get by didn't have to pay 300% interest on a loan, but could just have a line of credit that helped them kind of ease out the, you know, I got this bill to pay, my next paycheck is coming here. So anyways, there's some interesting scholarship around that. I think it's fairly well established that it is pretty unfair. I don't know what the solution is. There's some people who have ideas about things we should do differently. For sure, credit scores should not be used for employment purposes, because there's just plenty of things that are wrong with the credit score, and we don't need another reason why people don't have access to jobs. So anyways, I hope some of that was useful and interesting. And if you have more questions about it, always happy to talk more about it or send you more articles. All right. Talk to you later.